A missile launches from the Persian Gulf, and a U.S. carrier has less than 7 minutes to stop it. An Iranian anti-ship missile erupts from a coastal battery near the Strait of Hormuz, accelerating toward a U.S. carrier strike group nearly 200 miles away. At Mach speeds, the missile is moving so fast the clock immediately starts collapsing. 7 minutes to impact. Most people think aircraft carriers survive because they're gigantic floating fortresses packed with weapons. That's not the real reason. Carriers survive because every incoming threat has to pass through overlapping defensive layers designed to break the attack apart before it ever gets close. Iran doesn't fight one ship. It fights an entire defensive ecosystem. And the real reason Iran struggles starts long before the missile reaches the fleet. Most people imagine an aircraft carrier sailing alone through open water. That never happens. A U.S. carrier strike group moves like a floating network. Destroyers, cruisers, attack submarines, F-35s overhead, satellites watching from orbit, and circling high above everything else, the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye, one of the most important aircraft in the entire fleet. The biggest problem with sea-skimming missiles is the radar horizon. The curvature of the Earth hides low-flying missiles from ships until they get dangerously close. But airborne radar changes the math completely. Flying thousands of feet above the ocean, the Hawkeye can detect threats far beyond what surface ships can see. And once one platform detects the missile, the entire network knows. One destroyer can fire at a target while another aircraft is tracked hundreds of miles away. The missile may already be tracked before Iran even realizes it has been detected. And once the missile is seen, the chain begins. Iran already knows a single missile probably won't make it through. That's why its strategy was never built around one weapon. It was built around saturation, swarm drones, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, fast attack boats, multiple launch angles across the Persian Gulf. The geography around Hormuz actually helps this strategy. Iran has coastal batteries hidden along mountains, underground missile bases buried deep inland, and launch positions spread across narrow waterways designed to compress reaction time. The goal is not to beat one defensive layer. The goal is to overload all of them at once, because every U.S. interceptor fired matters. Vertical launch cells cannot be reloaded at sea. Red Sea operations against Houthi drones already showed how quickly defensive missiles can disappear during constant attacks. And economically, this gets ugly fast. A cheap drone forcing a multi-million-dollar interceptor launch is still a form of pressure. Iran becomes dangerous, not because its missiles are better, but because there are so many of them. But volume only matters if the missiles survive the outer ring. The first layer of defense doesn't even begin near the carrier. It starts hundreds of miles away. F/A-18. Super Hornets and stealthy F-35Cs are already airborne long before missiles appear on radar. Then came the EA-18G Growlers, some of the most powerful electronic warfare aircraft ever built. Their entire job is to attack the missile's brain. They jam radar seekers, break guidance links, create false targets, and phantom ships across the electromagnetic spectrum. Suddenly, the incoming missile is seeing ghost fleets instead of the real carrier. And if the missile depends on outside targeting updates, the Growler can completely sever that connection. A missile that loses guidance doesn't hit the carrier. It flies into the sea. Meanwhile, American fighters are hunting the launch sites themselves. This is where the Navy's philosophy becomes brutal. Shoot the archer, not the arrow. The moment Iranian launch platforms fire, they risk becoming targets themselves before a second wave can even launch. That's the real power of a carrier strike group. It doesn't just defend itself. It projects force so far outward that the battle often begins before the missiles even arrive. But if the missiles survive the electronic chaos, they hit the wall. But here's where the math turns brutal. Once the missiles survive the outer ring, they run into something the Navy calls the shield of the fleet. Aegis. This isn't just one radar or one ship. It's a combat network connecting destroyers, cruisers, aircraft, and sensors into a single battlefield picture. One ship can track a missile, while another ship fires the interceptor. The entire fleet fights like one organism. At the center of that wall is the SM-6, and this missile completely changed naval warfare. Older SM-2 interceptors depended on semi-active guidance. That meant the launching ship had to continuously illuminate the incoming target with radar during the final engagement. Lose the radar lock, lose the intercept. The SM-6 changed that by carrying its own active radar seeker derived from AMRAAM technology. It can fly toward a target using networked tracking data, then activate its own radar in the terminal phase and guide itself the rest of the way. That's what makes over-the-horizon interceptions possible. A destroyer escort may destroy a missile it never directly saw with its own radar. Behind the M6 comes ESSM, the Evolved Sea Sparrow missile. Faster, more agile, and built specifically to kill maneuvering sea-skimming missiles slipping through the outer defense layers. But there's a hidden weakness here. Every interceptor launched permanently empties a vertical launch cell until the ship returns to port. No reloads at sea. One destroyer may carry around 90 to 96 VLS cells, and once they're gone, they're gone. Every interception makes the shield thinner, and if something still survives, the carrier enters its final seconds. And this is where the battle stops feeling like strategy and starts feeling like pure survival. At this point, the missile is seconds away, maybe less. The carrier group has already burned through fighters, jamming, SM-6s, and ESSMs. Now the final defensive layer activates automatically, because human reaction time simply isn't fast enough anymore. The first weapon waiting inside that shrinking window is RAM, the rolling airframe missile. Small, fast, and designed specifically for terminal defense, RAM is fire and forget. It can lock onto radar emissions first, then switch to infrared tracking as it closes in. The missile doesn't need constant ship guidance. It launches, tracks, and hunts on its own. But if the threat keeps coming, the Phalanx CIWS takes over. And honestly, this thing feels terrifying even by modern standards. A fully automated Gatling gun firing 4,500 rounds per minute, tracking incoming missiles with its own radar and computer system. Humans may not even touch the controls during the engagement because there's no time left to debate anything. At Mach speeds, modern anti-ship missiles compress decision windows brutally. One mistake, one delay, one missed track. That's all it takes. The Navy is also testing laser systems for close defense. Against drones, they're incredibly effective and cheap compared to missiles. But hardened supersonic missiles moving at extreme speed still give current laser systems major problems. The closer the missile gets, the harder interception becomes. At this range, the ship stops asking humans for permission. But the terrifying part is this. Even the US Navy knows the chain can fail. And this part still haunts the Navy decades later. In 1987, USS Stark was struck by 2 Iraqi Exocet missiles in the Persian Gulf. 37 sailors were killed. The terrifying part wasn't just the attack itself. It was that the ship's defensive systems never properly engaged in time. The weapons existed. The layers existed. But the chain broke. That's the reality of layered defense. Every system depends on the one before it. Early warning, tracking, jamming, interceptors, terminal defense. If one link collapses, the pressure on every remaining layer explodes instantly. And modern warfare is making that problem worse. In the Red Sea, US warships have already burned through huge numbers of expensive interceptors, stopping Houthi drones and missiles. Cheap attacks can force enormously expensive defensive responses. That's why modern naval defense doesn't weaken gradually. It cascades, lose early warning, and suddenly SM-6 crews have less time. Less time means more missiles leak through. More leakers mean RAM and CIWS face impossible reaction windows. Carrier defense is powerful, but it is not invincible. And that's exactly why Iran's entire strategy revolves around breaking the chain faster than America can sustain it. So can Iran threaten ships in the Persian Gulf? Absolutely. Can it force the United States into expensive defensive operations? Without question. Can it create chaos across global shipping lanes and regional naval traffic? Definitely. But destroying a US Navy carrier is a completely different problem. Because Iran doesn't just have to hit one target. It has to survive detection, electronic jamming, combat air patrols, SM-6 interceptors, ESSM defenses, RAM systems, and finally Phalanx CIWS, all while the clock keeps collapsing from minutes to seconds. That's the part most people miss. Carrier defense isn't one superweapon protecting the fleet. It's a layered system designed to buy time for the next layer behind it. And every mile closer to the carrier makes survival exponentially harder. Iran doesn't lose because it lacks missiles. It loses because every second closer to the carrier becomes exponentially harder to survive.